I suspect that no one really needs reminding that all of us as individuals, as businesses, as society need to step up our efforts to reduce the impact that we're having on planet Earth. But what does that mean in practical terms for retailers? What can they change and what's the impact for them, for consumers and on the environment? And what is the role of payments in all of that? Let's find out in this episode of Navigating Digital Payments.
Welcome to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline, bringing you the latest innovations, trends and predictions about the future of payments.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Navigating Digital Payments podcast. I'm David Daly. I look after the Discovery Hub here at Worldline. And today I'm really delighted to be joined by Julie Delignon, who is the Head of Sustainable Development and Circular Economy at Decathlon in France. Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, David. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here today.
It's really nice to have you here for this discussion. So at the end, I really want to come back to this question of whether or not you think sports equipment can become more sustainable. But first, maybe we can understand a little bit what you've been trying at Decathlon, what lessons you've learned, and also what you have found the implications are then for payments. But before I come on to all of that, perhaps we could rewind even further and I can ask you why you saw this need to kind of transform in this direction.
Well, actually, it's not something new. We have started in 1986, the Decathlon in France. And it was something quite new where you could actually go at Decathlon. You can put your product on the shelves and then people could come and buy it directly from you. And it's also the same year when we actually have opened the first workshops in the stores to help repair Decathlon products. So you see, it's like it was back in 80s, so it's really long time ago. But what is quite new now is the acceleration and the development of all those new business models. And it's quite a game changer for us.
It's funny when you say quite a long time ago, because in my head, the 80s is not so long ago at all. But it's 40 years, obviously. And this is, I don't know, it's a sign of getting old. But that's really interesting. And maybe it also shows two things. One is, of course, it's a long journey, these types of activities. But also, have you seen that it has changed because of the more digital world that we live in, mobile, online? Because again, in the 80s, all shopping was physical in store pretty much.
Definitely, David. It's a really a big change. Actually, we have discovered that people also have new ways of consuming. So sport users are changing. They are much more interested in having a positive impact on the environment. There is also actually new needs linked to indeed the development of digital. So we expect now to have things much more quickly than before. We sometimes don't expect to have to leave our house to be able to receive a product. And so there is also an increase in terms of, so this kind of expectations and the level of service you're going to get. And the thing which was also a game changer for us is the fact that at our level, at company level, we have to deal with higher and higher prices and we have to source different kind of materials. So it has a big impact also on the price of our products, and we want to keep our product accessible to the many. So, and the second thing is that we also want to do our part to reduce our emissions. So we need to keep global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees by 2050. So it's also a way to actually be able to achieve that.
So you mentioned that it's not new in terms of the concept of trying to do things to enable reuse and being more environmentally friendly. But what new approaches have you been trying then more recently, Julie?
Well, so something we have been doing for, I would say, maybe 6 years, something like that. It's the development of buyback. So this is the way we can actually offer our clients to go back to our stores and be able to sell their products directly, and we have an immediate payment. So you don't have to worry about putting an online ad and to worry about whether you're going to sell it or not. This is quite new. And this is a way we have to also manage differently our products. So what kind of products should we buy back? How much should I buy back? How much should I sell this product? So this is really something which is quite changing compared to the business as usual. The second thing is the subscription. It's a new model. We have this habit because now there is Netflix, there is Amazon Prime, and so on. So you kind of get used to have kind of subscription. The thing which is quite changing is that you have a subscription for a product. So now you're not the owner of your product, but you just have the use of this product, and you have to pay, for instance, 10 euros per month, and you can enjoy riding a bike, for instance. And the last thing is that those two business models, for instance, that we have developed quite recently, they all need to rely on refurbishment and new capacities. So this is quite a big change because first it means we need to have a good diagnosis of the product to identify what kind of processes we need to implement so that we can really ensure that we have a good refurbished product with good security measures. And we are sure that you can ride safe or even use your tent at your camping without worrying about the rain or anything. So
there's two interesting things there. Like you say, firstly, it sounds like behind the scenes there's quite a logistical change in processing the return of the goods, whether that's because they're returned as part of a subscription or being sold in more of a second-hand way. And as you say, making sure they're of a good quality and being able to resell them. But also in a recent episode of the podcast, we talked about new business models and we talked a bit about subscription and rental. And my colleague Johan Maas made the point that probably for some things people will still want to buy because they have a certain emotional connection, whether it's a feeling of security by owning your own home, for example. But there are other things where it clearly makes a lot of sense. I'm interested, what sort of reaction have you seen from your customers to these new approaches?
Well, it's a good question. Actually, it was a bit a bet at the beginning. So what is great is that the reaction was really, really good. And that's why we were able now to scale those business models. Actually, the first thing is that our customers see a big interest in those alternative business models, not really because of the environmental impact, but rather for financial reasons. We know that 88% of them, for instance, are interested in buying second-hand products just because they are cheaper, and this is the number one reason. So it's not really what we expected first, but it's good because with current inflation, I think it's very interesting to keep having product, but at a reasonable price, but a really good quality. And the second thing, so the other reaction of our customer is, I think it was a success because also it answered different types of pain points. So, and it's funny because we talk about subscription or about buyback and so on, but it's not the same pain point we are actually tackling. For instance, for when you rent an adult bike, the main pain point is, am I going to see my bike again if I put this bike on this corner and I'm going to go? So there is a lot of robbery, and so this was the main pain point and the main fear. So we had this kind of insurance included. While on the other side, when you rent a kid's bike, it's more because your kids are growing, and I think it's a total different need. So, but you use subscription in both cases. It's just that it's really a different need. So I think the main thing is to be sure that it's actually is interesting for your clients, and in those cases, it's definitely the case.
And I think we did some research as well into re-commerce and had a similar conclusion that the primary interest for consumers was financial and saving money, although there was also this association with a more sustainable way of living that was driving it as well. And I think it also makes sense, doesn't it, where you have, so if you are cycling every day of the week and you want to personalize your bike and you're customizing it, then maybe rental or subscription doesn't make sense. But if you're going biking for a 3-week holiday and for the rest of the time that bike's going to sit in the garage gathering dust, then it probably makes total sense financially to just rent it or subscribe for the bike for that period. But also it means that someone else can be using it in the time you're not using it, which means less production, less impact on the environment. So I can see that being really good. You mentioned a little bit earlier the behind the scenes operational side. Can you say a bit more about what the biggest challenges have been there?
Yes, because there are many. So I think the first challenge is to change the operating model. Actually, Decathlon has been created in the 70s, and we are a very good company with lots of processes which are built for selling brand new products. And now we need to define a new business model. So it requires new processes, new tools, new ways of working. And the big challenge is actually to change the old habits. So we need to actually define new roads that nobody used before, because it's also quite a new way of making business, actually. And you cannot see it really successful around, because it's quite difficult to actually have an environmental impact and also to be profitable in these new models where you need to have lots of investment. So you need to give the right reasons to believe in your businesses. And the second thing is also not only the operations and the processes that need to be reviewed, but also the way we measure performances. We were just discussing the fact that we develop subscription. Subscription is a model where you receive, for instance, 10 euros per month. So it's very different from having 100 euros right now. So when you compare the first month, you're like, okay, Julie, so I'm losing money, but totally. No, it's not this way. You don't have to see things like that. So it's also, we are not an NGO, and we need also to define sustainable business also financially. And this is the balance that we need to keep in mind. And I'm struggling sometimes also internally to change our dashboards, to change the way we measure those KPIs, so that I can prove that it's really good for our planet, it's really good for our customers, and it's really good for us too.
And it's interesting you say that, because it comes up again and again in the podcast when we talk about what makes things successful, which is that you always have to have a sustainable business model behind as well. Because actually, if there is no money to be made, then actually nothing will succeed in the long run. So it's great and of huge importance to be protecting the environment and improving sustainability on that side. But actually, if there's no business model behind it, then things don't tend to last. So that's quite interesting to hear. Are there things that you've been adapting or changing at Decathlon based on the feedback you've had so far?
Yes, I think we were able to adapt our value propositions. We were also able to adapt our offers based on sports users' feedback. I have, for instance, a few examples in mind. I'll talk to you about buyback. So we first offered only vouchers in exchange for the products that people were selling, but it was not enough. When you sell a bike which costs 900 euros, you're not really happy with a 900 euros voucher at Decathlon. So basically, we were really incentive to change the way we were getting the products. So we developed actually the payment by bank transfer recently. So this is one of the evolutions, for instance. And the second thing is regarding subscription. We have tested a lot of different types of products, but there are some which were much more interesting than others. And to give you an example, actually, we tried tennis table, and it was not really, really relevant.
Which is interesting. And do you have any idea why table tennis tables were not... Is it the size of it? Is it just that this is the kind of thing people either have, or what was any idea what was behind that?
It's there are different things. The first thing is the fact that when people want to have it, it's rather because they want to use it all the time, and they really want to. They have a garden and they want to use it all day long during the good season. So they don't see really the need to have a really a one-shot rental. And at the end, the issue also was the fact that to create value, you need to get back the product and be able to rent it again. And the fact that the table tennis were outside, under the rain, under the sun, and so on, it made it quite complicated at the end after 2 years. If people were not really ready to pack it and put a protection on it, it was difficult to have really, really good product to be able to rent them at the end. So this model works because you can have several cycles of rental, and it was not really adapted regarding the tennis table currently, and the use people were doing of that.
And it's interesting you say that. There's two things there then, isn't there? One is, I'm thinking as well, the alternatives to renting the equipment would be to go to a leisure centre and book your 1 hour slot and play table tennis there. And maybe even the same for gym equipment. If you have a home gym, it's because you're going to use it 6 days a week for the next 6 years, not because you're going to use it for a few weeks. It's a big investment as well. Like you said, with a table tennis table, you need the space, the room for it. So there's a lot else around that. And then the other side is the ease of returning it, I guess, because like you say, I'm thinking of various goods that I've received and sometimes had to return in the past, and there are definitely ones that are as easy as popping to the local shop and dropping it off, and then there are ones that are much harder, let's say, to repackage and return.
Yes, but we developed also fitness apparels, and it's okay because you have someone who is delivering it in the room where you want it to be installed and set up, and then they come back to retrieve the product. And it's okay. I mean, the experience is okay, especially because you have more and more people also working from home, or you have different kind of hours. So, and it's flexible during the weekend if you're only at home during the weekend. So people are quite happy about actually this experience of getting the product and giving it back. The only issue is actually, indeed, it's in the middle. I don't need the product for a really, really short time of time, like just an afternoon. But at the end, I don't need it also for a very long period of time for several years. So you actually have to match those kind of people's need, which is quite okay, because for fitness, you have lots of people who would like to get in shape quite over a few months, or because you need also to train because you had a surgery, or you are not very at ease for a long period of time. So I think it actually meets some needs, but regarding other products like a tennis table, it was not the case at all. So it's really interesting to focus on the usage of the product, on the different types of people's needs and motivation around the product, to really understand what kind of offer we need to develop. And on the top of that, subscription is not about product only. You also have to include services, which are very important for people. I was talking about the theft insurance, or about the maintenance and so on. So we develop lots of services which are included also in the subscription. And I think it is this mix of product and services which makes it also very interesting for our customers.
In a strange way, it reminds me of car leasing, which of course has been around probably since even before the 80s, if we dare go that far back. But it's interesting that convenience, I think, is often an attraction there. The idea that you're paying a fixed fee and it includes the maintenance of the car and it includes the insurance and everything. And so you have nothing else. So it's not always cheaper, but it's a lot more convenient and it's a more predictable cost. And I guess that's what you're saying a little bit as well. It's not just about the ownership of the products, but it's the things that you can wrap around that.
And it's totally the case. I agree with you. It's really convenient. You can plan the expenses that you have. And also, it's also the case for buyback. You know exactly what you have. You have the price right now. You're not going to struggle. Is it the good price? Not the good price? It's a kind of it's a peace of mind also.
And it's interesting you mentioned as well about vouchers not being very popular, and I guess it's particularly with large amounts. But I always think whenever I receive a voucher, whether it's as a gift or whatever, the problem is it does often become like a time-limited item on my to-do list. I now need to spend this voucher with this store before the expiry date. Even if that's 1 or 2 years away, it still creates something that needs attention. Whereas, of course, being paid with a traditional currency, let's say, means that you don't suddenly have a pressure of when you can spend this money at that particular store.
Yes, and if you want to stop having a tent and you want to start the stand-up paddle, then you're free to do that. But if you want to stop and not start the sport again, it's going to be a bit complicated for you to spend this amount of money too. So it's really nice to be free also on this start.
In a moment, Julie, I'd like to perhaps come on to what specific impacts you've seen around the payments part, and also then ask you what you think the future holds for making sports equipment more sustainable. First, I just want to remind people that if they want to get in contact with the podcast, let us know topics you'd like us to cover, suggest guests, then you can reach us by emailing ndp-podcast@worldline.com. And also, just to remind you, if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, then you'll never miss an episode. And also leave us a rating and a review. So, Julie, with all these new approaches that you've been experimenting with at Decathlon and the feedback you've had, what impacts have you seen around the payments part specifically?
Well, there are a few impacts. When you sell brand new products, actually the payment methods are not the same as buying back a product from a sport user or when you rent a product to him or to her. For instance, for buyback, we had difficulties to actually match payments with the bank. So we had a lot of phone calls of people saying, "Oh, I don't understand. I haven't received the money on my bank account. How is it possible?" And it's sometimes a delay due to the bank transfer because banks have different kind of delays. Sometimes it was issue with the bank itself. Sometimes we at the very beginning. Now it's of course solved after 2 years, but sometimes indeed we had a few issues with specific banks. And the fact is that it's key for us because buyback, the value proposition is that the payment should be very simple and immediate compared to other experiences you could have. So it was key for us to actually revise this kind of payment process and be sure we were really aligned with what we were offering. The second thing, which was really a big pain point, and we had to learn a lot about that, is the fraud regarding subscription. So sometimes we were seeing a lot of unpaid bills, more and more over time. And it was really complicated for us to really understand. So why do we have people not paying? Is it because they forgot to change their credit card? Should we have IBAN? Should we change and have an impact on the user experience? Or could we work with others to reduce the risk? So we had to develop lots of new skills also and knowledge regarding risk management and fraud management, which was not something we were used to when you were selling a product and you had to pay right now, basically. So it was interesting. There is a lot of bridges between subscription, for instance, and financing. You were talking about leasing before. So we had to learn also from it. What is very interesting, actually, in those new approaches is that you learn all the time and you keep growing and experimenting. And this is how after you can have the best experiences for your customers, for your teammates. So that's cool.
And it's interesting hearing, Silly, on the first example you gave of how to manage the payouts. It comes up again and again, I think, when we're discussing on the podcast, that in payments, it's never the happy path that takes the effort. It's always I didn't receive it's any kind of dispute or issue that takes a lot of the effort. And also it's interesting to hear what you say, that of course if the whole value proposition is around it being quick, simple, convenient, you don't have to place an advert, etc. If you then have to wait 5-10 days for the payment, well, it would be quicker to place an advert in the newspaper and receive cash from someone who comes to pick it up from you. So if the payment's very long and protracted, then it gets rid of the benefit. And on the second point, I also think you mentioned right at the start that we're used to, say, Netflix and Spotify, subscription services. But of course, they have the benefit that if you don't pay, they can they can easily cut off the service, which is then a big incentive for you to renew your card details.
Exactly.
But of course, if I've got my bike and I'm happy cycling around the mountains...
Exactly. I can't go and talk to you and say, okay, now I need my bike, because actually you can just keep it and this is the end of the story. So now we have worked with another company which is going to come to you and say, okay, now you give by the back, and we have other means to prevent this. But indeed, when you have products and you have physical products, you cannot just stop and say, okay, you don't have access anymore to this service. You have to get it back. So it's where it's also quite consuming in terms of resources on our side. Because we cannot just say, okay, we leave it and it's okay.
So Julie, maybe we come finally onto two sort of related questions. So firstly, what kind of difference do you think what Decathlon is doing now is having? What do you think the impact is having? And then maybe a follow-up question for that is there more to do, and what do you think that would look like?
Yes, I hope I'm making what I'm doing is making a difference. This is why I think it's so interesting to work on this kind of topics. I think those kind of new models are actually making more accessible, more environmentally friendly ways of consuming. So I think we actually help sports users decrease their CO2 impact. While it's more affordable to them, because sometimes you're like, okay, I can have less impact on the environment, but I need to pay twice the price, so I'm not really ready to make this sacrifice. So I find it really cool to be able to make it possible. The second thing is that I love my job because I feel like I create jobs too. And I think in the current economic situation, I think it's key also to be able to wake up in the morning and to have also a sense and to work for a good project. So far we have 1,100 technicians in France. We will recruit 100 more by end of the year. And the more we develop circular businesses, the more we need technicians to actually repair the products, diagnose them, and so on. So I think it's quite I think it's making a difference. Maybe not a lot, but at least for those people, it's a difference. And also for me, for my team, at Decathlon level, we develop new skills. We raise awareness about environmental issues, and we actually try to prove that, and we prove, I think, that we can actually make business, but also it's not something which is totally against the fact of making a difference for the environment, So it's a way of making sure that we can keep doing business over the next 20 years and be able also to match the 2050 net zero roadmap. And for your second question, it was, do you think there is more than can be done? Well, I think, of course. Of course, we can always do more. Sometimes I'm always saying, okay, it's not enough. We should go ahead. It's not ambitious enough, and so on. But I think we should also tell ourselves that it's okay and we can go one step at a time. So one of the issues we face is that many times repairing or refurbishing is costing more than the price of the product. I think there is two ways of dealing with that. Is either by developing new tools, processes, and ways of working internally, which we are doing right now. Or you can also think, and this is something we want to do also in parallel, is that it will require incentives from the government to encourage these types of approaches. So I think it's important that it becomes interesting for the private sector to also invest more in this field. So it could be through a lower VAT for second-hand products. It could be incentives and bonuses for refurbishment. So everything is work in progress. We are working also, we have connections with through public affairs, with the government, with the European Commission and so on. So I think, yes, little step by little step, I think we can do more. And this is going to be the combination of everything which can make it happen.
And it just your answer reminds me of two things. One is that, of course, with this huge climate challenge we're facing, no one individual or one company can solve this by themselves, but we all have to do our part. And if you add together the efforts of everyone, then it can solve this. And the other thing is, I can't remember quite who the quote is from, but it's that quote of many people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So as you say, it's about little concrete steps towards the goal, and if you manage to take many small steps, then eventually you get there, even if it's a long journey.
Yes, and I really encourage everybody who would like to launch this kind of processes to have this kind of test and learn approaches, so that you know where you're going to go, little step after little step, and you can take the most out of what you learn at every stage, and then make sure that you stop some projects and you start new ones, and you scale the ones that make sense for your company, for the people you work with also, because it's very important for all our teammates at Decathlon, and also for your customers. It's a key to be focused on what people want, and not create things because it's going to save the planet. It's the environment in which as humans, we are growing, which and if we want to live the same way, or actually to enjoy our environment and the nature, we need to actually have those baby steps, and make sure that the more we are taking those baby steps, the more we can actually make sure that we reduce the impact we have on the environment.
Julie, that was really fascinating to hear what you've been working on at Decathlon. I think it was interesting, firstly, to learn that it's not totally new, but of course the technologies that we have now are changing how this can be done. I think it was interesting to hear the feedback you've had from customers, and particularly which types of products this does work for and which ones that it doesn't work for. Obviously, you also talked through some of the challenges and some of the changes you're making as a result of the feedback you've had. And then I think it's quite inspirational, really, to hear you talking about how it's about concrete baby steps, experimental ideas, and then keep the ones that work and scale those and discard the ones that don't. So really want to thank you for spending some time today with us for the podcast, Julie.
Thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure discussing with you.
You're very welcome, and you're welcome to come back another time and give us an update on what else you've been up to in the next year. And that just leaves me to thank you, our dear listeners, for joining us once again for this episode of Navigating Digital Payments.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline. Join us next time to learn more about the latest innovations, trends, and predictions for the future of payments.